course code is BOSS 315. Course title, Business Communication. Facilitator, Dr. Nana Usman Baturi. In the last lecture, before I go into today's lecture, I need to talk briefly about the last lecture we had with you. In the last lecture, we've learned the nature of business communication, where we defined business communication as the process of passing information and understanding from one person to the other. We also learned the variables in communication process, distortions in communication or business communication, whereby even our mother tongue do affect us in the course of communication. And we said wherever you have such problem, you can repeat it, repeat the word, then demonstrate, and also give examples so that the receiver or receivers of your message can understand you better. We also looked at the principles of effective business communication. And lastly, importance of business communication, whereby you have business ideas, specialization of tasks, motivation of employees, etc., etc. You will agree with me that business communication is the lifeblood of every organization. Thank you. We are going to look at today's lecture, which is study session 2. What we are going to look at is modes of communication in business, the introduction. In this study session, we will explore different modes of communication in business organization. We will take a look at oral mode, written mode, and mediated communication in business. We will also look at the advantages and disadvantages of each mode of communication. The learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to differentiate between different modes of communication. This is the preview of study session 2. As you can see there, you see modes of communication in business, down to different modes of communication, whereby we have oral mode, written mode, and mediated communication or mode. There are many different modes of communication. We are still continuing. There are many modes of conveying messages from a sender to a receiver. Each of these modes has its advantages and disadvantages. For instance, you have a message to, if for instance you have a message to send to your friend in Gombe, you may decide to call him or her on the phone. You may decide to write that person a letter or even send it through an email. All these are some different types of options open to you for the transmission of the message to your friend in Gombe. It is obvious that while you have options available to you for transmitting your message, the cost and effectiveness of each of these means of transmission differ. The effectiveness of each mode is determined by many factors. These range from the nature of the message, the target audience, the competence and the resources of the sender, and other environmental factors. The modes of communication can be classified into 3. You have oral mode, written mode, and mediated communication. We will be explaining each of these in detail. Oral mode is used in a day-to-day activities like lectures. This is what I'm doing now, conversations, interviews, tutorials, and other discussions that are done in a face-to-face communication situation. Oral communication can take place between 2 people or among a small group or large group of people. When an individual voices out his thought or thoughts, he or she is said to be engaged in a form of oral communication. We discover that there are certain factors that are to be taken into consideration while engaged in oral communication. And these are behavior, appearance, voice quality, and listening skills. We are going to talk on behavior. We noted earlier that oral communication does not entail speech and sound alone. It includes gesture, facial expression, and other body movements that are capable of supporting the spoken words. Often, often confusion arises as to the meaning of what was said if it was not accompanied by appropriate gestures. The speaker therefore has to know the appropriate behavior that will amplify his message. 2. Appearance. This refers to other items of information like costumes, makeup, hairstyles, nails, jewelries, and other objects that complement the physical appearance of the speaker. Often in oral communication, the speaker's appearance is the first thing that strikes the receiver long before the speaker says a thing. It determines the degree of attention the sender of the message will receive from the listener or listeners. Some dresses are appropriate for some occasions, just as they are inappropriate for some other situations. For example, a pair of pajamas and slippers may not be suitable for a classroom, an office, or an official function. The third item there is voice quality. This factor refers to the speaker's use of tone, pitch, and stress or stresses. It involves the speaker's mastery of the rules of the language as well as its or his phonetics. It's supposed to be its phonetics. That is, pronunciation and articulation. Some people are naturally endowed with sweet, melodious voice that can easily attract and convince people, while others have coarse voice quality that tends to irritate their listeners. I advise whichever voice you have, thank God for that and make use of it effectively. The fourth one is listening skills. In oral communication, it is not enough for the speaker to know how to pass his or her messages or to adopt appropriate appearance and behavior. He or she must be a good listener too. This is to avoid breakdown in oral communication. Oral communication gives room for instant reception, processing, and feedback from the receiver. This gives the sender an opportunity to assess the effectiveness of his or her message and to make modification if necessary. The receiver too can ask for instant clarification on any point he or she does not understand. That takes us to advantages of oral communication, that the instant feedback reduces uncertainty in the interpretation of the message. This leads to better understanding by the participants. 2. It is flexible and the sender has the opportunity to adapt his message to suit his audience. 3. It offers better possibilities for further planning of message. 4. The source can assess the weak points in his communication spot. 5. It assures the sender that his message is not only being received but understood. 6. It is competitively cheap and timely if participants are within the reach. Disadvantages of oral communication. It is basically transient, that is lasting for a short period only, and may not be easily recorded for future reference unless recorded, that's what we are doing, with the aid of electronic device like tape recorder or camera. Experience has shown that when electronic devices are used, the participants become too conscious of their actions and utterances. This affects the form of the message itself. 2. Oral communication is easily misinterpreted and susceptible to different forms of distortions, ranging from omission of details, addition of extra information, modification of message to suit personal idiosyncrasies, highlighting of a few details, etc. 3. Some emotional messages like termination of appointment, death, retrenchment, and other misfortunes are not easy to convey to the victims by words of mouth. 4. The over-independence of spoken words put a lot of stress on our mental faculties because we have to try to assimilate all that has been said and possibly recall them when that need arises. 5. It is often not practical nor convenient to reach and converse with high-level officials in a face-to-face encounter. The self-check question is there and feedback. The self-check question and feedback are there for you. The next is written mode. Written mode of communication refers to the translation of oral messages into alphabetic symbols. It ranges from the human handwriting to the printed text. This mode of communication is used for documents like notes, letters, memoranda, and minutes of meeting, posters, computer, printouts, and newspapers. Advantages of written mode. 1. Written communication is more permanent and can be stored for future reference. 2. In a business organization, written communication helps to confirm our transactions and commitment made orally. 3. It cannot be easily misquoted since materials can easily be retrieved for verification. 4. It can be read several times over for a better understanding of the content. It can also be read anywhere at any time the reader chooses. 5. The sender can edit his message and introduce new ideas before transmission. This gives room for coherence and greater impact. 6. It can be read severally or it can be read several times by the sender and modified before it is transmitted to the reader or readers. Disadvantages of written mode. 1. Written communication has delayed feedback. 2. It does not have instant reception and interpretation like oral communication. 3. The process of transmission takes more time than in oral communication where the participants are in a face-to-face situation. 4. People are cautious in composing written messages because they could be used against them in future or in a law court. 5. It is more expensive compared to the oral mode. Disadvantages, we have done that. Then self-check also are there for you to read on. And the next is mediated communication. Mediated communication in a business organization involves the transmission of oral and or written messages through electronic devices like telephone, radio, television, online computers, walkie-talkie, microfilm, videotapes, and the like. It is most useful in large organizations like ours where face-to-face communication is limited or is ineffective. It is more useful in large organizations where face-to-face communication is limited or is ineffective in reaching many people at the same time. Advantages of mediated mode. 1. It provides greater convenience to the participants because they can engage in other activities as they communicate. 2. It gives the sender more flexibility in the techniques of the packaging and sending his messages. 3. It gives the receiver greater control over the message reception in that he can decide to tune in or off at his convenience. He can contribute actively in the process of information selection, packaging, and eventual transmission. It is contrary to the sender, controlled oral and written communication. Sorry, this is contrary to the sender, controlled oral and written communication. Advantages of mediated mode. 1, it provides greater convenience. I have done that. Then 4, it has an improved feedback mechanism since the receiver can either talk back or type in his reaction immediately. 5, it provides more information to many people at the same time. Disadvantages. Most mediated communication lack the advantage of combining oral and non-verbal means for more faithful and effective transmission and reception of messages. Most mediated communications are depersonalized, so much so that the participants may not know much about each other. This could hamper the success of the communication. 3, the gadgets are expensive to acquire. Consequently, they are beyond the reach of some potential receivers. After all, you need to own a set to receive the message. In this study session, we talked about the different ways in which communications take place in a business organization. We discussed also the oral, written, and mediated modes of business communication. Thank you.